Hello, I'm Tiffany Cloud. Welcome to The Storm, and thank you for watching today on WYLN 35. I hope you're all enjoying your summer. And even though it's only summer 2017, the race for governor of Pennsylvania is already on. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by a man who wishes to get the Republican nomination next year so he can challenge Governor Wolf in the general election. My guest hails from the Pittsburgh area and has an interesting background. I'm glad he's come to Hazleton to tell us more about his vision for Pennsylvania. After the break, Paul Mango, Republican candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. Welcome back to The Storm. I am so pleased today to be joined by Paul Mango. He's a Republican and he is candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. Mr. Mango, thank you so much for coming on The Storm.
Thank you, Tiffany, for having me. This is just wonderful to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here in the Hazleton area and yes. Really looking forward to you getting to tell my audience a bit more about you and why you've decided to run for governor.
Terrific.
So with that said, you have a really wonderful personal story, and I'd like if we could just start by you sharing a bit about that story with me so our audience can get to know you a bit better.
Terrific. Well, it starts with my grandfather, actually, coming from Italy in 1909, and I'm telling people he had the good sense to bypass Ellis Island, and he landed in Philadelphia, right here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They took him from the docks, and they whisked him right up to Susquehanna County, where he worked on the railroad for several decades. And his job was shoveling coal cinders from steam locomotives. So that's how the Mango family started in America. The product of an Italian, Irish, Catholic set of parents. My mother had her first 4 children in less than 4 years.
Oh my goodness, no God bless her.
No twins, I know. No twins, I was the 4th one.
Okay.
And then I have a little brother who is 6 years younger than me, so we were a wonderful family of 7 total and did the typical things. I was an altar boy, we went to church every Sunday, we went to confession every month, no matter what, and we had dinner on Sundays together, and it was just a wonderful upbringing.
And then at some point you got the call to serve. Tell me about that.
Well, my dad was a National Guard officer for my whole childhood. He was too young, a little bit too young to serve in World War II, so he joined the National Guard. He was actually in the Special Forces for a while, and when I was 7 years old, he went off to airborne school. And he came back with his green beret and his jump boots and he had lost 20 pounds, he had a really short, tight haircut. And I said, wow, what is this all about? And he cultivated an interest over the subsequent 10 years. And when it came time for me to apply to college, I only applied to one college, and that was West Point. And
you were graduated from West Point what year?
1981.
Okay.
Ronald Reagan handed me my diploma.
I must admit I've seen pictures of that on Facebook. That's quite wonderful.
It was fantastic, and I met my wife there. So I think
even better.
Even better. She's the class of '82. I'm the class '81. So she had arrived before any women graduated. So a real pioneer.
Absolutely.
And then we went off and did our service time, and I was, again, fortunate. I got an assignment down at Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne Division, a wonderful unit, one of the best ones in the Army, and its mission at the time was to be anywhere in the world in 48 hours. So what that meant was we had to train in the mountains, in the snow, in the jungle, in the desert, in the swamps, because we didn't know where we were going to be within a couple of days. So wonderful training, terrific soldiers, and just a great leadership experience for me.
And then after West Point, you apparently just hadn't had enough of doing interesting things. You went on for some additional education. Yeah,
so after my service time, after Fort Bragg, we went to Germany for a couple years, and then from Germany, went straight to Harvard Business School.
Excellent.
Again, another wonderful experience, and had a terrific time there. And I was hired by this firm, McKinsey & Company, and was assigned in Pittsburgh. So I had never been to Pittsburgh in my life, and we had just had our first child, and we said we wanted a town where we could raise our family. And they said, how about Pittsburgh? We said, well, we've never been there, but let us take a look. And we fell in love with it, and that was in June of '88, and so we've lived there almost 30 years.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I always like my guests to get to know a little bit about the personal side of a person, and certainly a lot of what you did has shaped who you are and why you're deciding to run for governor, I'm sure, which is my logical next question.
Yeah.
Why do you want to be governor of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, well, you know, you heard a story just now, and your viewers did, of a guy who is the beneficiary of the great American dream. My grandfather came here with absolutely nothing, but a dream in his heart, and that dream was of America, and I lived that dream. I think we're losing the opportunity. I think the next generation is losing the opportunity to experience what I've experienced. So that's reason number one. Two is, my classmates from West Point, many of them have spent 5, 6, 7 years in Iraq, in Afghanistan, immense sacrifice. I haven't made those sacrifices. And third, I think we live in a state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that is the single most underperforming state in the country relative to its potential. So you take those three together, a blessed life. My best friends in life have made immense sacrifices, I haven't, and there is an opportunity to have impact on 13 million fellow Pennsylvanians, and with all that's been given to me, it would be completely unpatriotic for me not to step up and try to change the direction of the Commonwealth of Pennselsvania. That's why I'm doing it.
Okay.
It's a return to public service.
Let's talk about that number 3, because the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has a lot of very, very serious issues. We have one of the highest corporate tax rates in the nation of any state. And that said, of course, is certainly a deterrent to many companies coming in. It's also causing a lot of our best and brightest to flee the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
We have an elderly population that's growing. We have an opioid epidemic. We have an unfunded pension liability. We have property taxes affecting areas of the Commonwealth, and the list goes on and on and on. That said, I mean, what is your vision for Pennsylvania? Because there's just so much to do.
Yeah, we put it into a single sentence. We need to create the economic opportunity to bring our jobs and our children back home to Pennsylvania. Okay. Now that has a lot of things beneath it, but that is our primary intent, and I think everything begins with robust economic growth. And you know what's happening in Harrisburg today? The conversation is about higher taxes or less spending. No one's even talking about growth, and we have an unbelievable number of natural and human resources in this state that are completely underutilized. We have the largest deposit of natural gas in the world, right here beneath our feet. We have technologies coming out of our universities that are completely unprecedented. They'll change the way we live, they'll change the way we work, and make us highly competitive in the global environment. Artificial intelligence, robotics, additive manufacturing. I know these are fancy terms, but you go to Carnegie Mellon University or Penn State or Penn, these are global leaders. We're leading. I go all over the world, they talk about the technologies coming out of our universities. And third, we have proximity to the richest commercial markets in the world through our ports and through our location. There's a reason we're called the Keystone State. We have everything we need to have a 4 to 5% growth economy and bring back the 300,000 jobs in manufacturing we've lost in 2 decades. The only thing we lack is leadership.
Okay, well, what I want to talk about in the next segment is a bit more about leadership and what makes you the right leader. And also, you brought up about Harrisburg and what Harrisburg's been talking about. So I want to talk about what Harrisburg's been focusing upon and perhaps have you counter some points that are coming out of the current governor's office. So with that, we will take a break and we will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. I'm joined today by Paul Mango, candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. In the last break, we were talking about the importance of investing in the Pennsylvania economy. We were talking about the importance of leadership. And we talked about what the message has been that's coming out of Harrisburg. I want to talk first about the message coming out of Harrisburg because the office of Governor Wolf has described his budget as a responsible solution to our Commonwealth's deficit challenge. He's touting no broad-based tax increases, a savings of $2 billion by cutting waste and increasing efficiencies, protection of education investments and services for the disabled, financing the ability to fight opioids, and investing in a growing economy of Pennsylvania. That's a lot. I get it. I want to kind of tackle some of those big issues with you. And I really want to start with, he keeps talking about cuts to wasteful spending. Do you feel that we are making those cuts? And clearly you've said that we're not doing enough to invest in Pennsylvania. So I'd like you to talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, so we took a very close look at the budget. And the first thing to know is since the time he has submitted his budget until now, we've come up hundreds of millions of dollars short in revenue. So I'm not sure how relevant his budget submission was if it was back in January, February, because even since then, we're short hundreds of millions of dollars of anticipated revenue. But we broke it apart. And I'm not being cynical, but if you look at the essence of his budget, it's if Pennsylvanians drink more alcohol, if they gamble more, if we give amnesty to tax cheaters, and if we ask senior citizens to stay in the workforce longer, we have nothing to worry about. What could possibly go wrong? How can an economy, a state economy of almost $700 billion and a population of 13 million people even accept a budget like that? It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful, and what I would encourage your viewers to do is take a close look under the covers at what he's really doing versus what he says he's doing.
How can a governor go about encouraging economic growth in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with our corporate tax rate being 9.99% as it is?
Yep.
Can it happen, or do we have to have the legislature get that adjusted first before we have a shot at anything getting fixed?
Great question. The corporate tax rate is very, very important, but it's not the only thing inhibiting business development. And I'll give you 3 or 4 other things.
Thank you.
1, a leader sets the example. How does he spend his time? Well, how much has Governor Wolf left the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for the purpose of promoting Pennsylvania business? We took a look at his travel schedule. We couldn't find one trip in 3 years. Leaders should start by setting the example, right? That's number 1. Number 2 is he oversees one of the most difficult barriers to business growth in the country, which is the Department of Environmental Protection and his Department of Transportation. I cannot tell you how many businessmen I've talked to and businesswomen I've talked to who have said the regulatory state in Harrisburg is their biggest barrier to growth. He's the leader of those folks. It needs a cultural transformation. 3, there are tens of thousands of jobs going wanting in Pennsylvania today for lack of skilled labor. So why don't we reconstitute skilled labor? And 4th, even without touching the tax rates, infrastructure, ports, pipelines, locks. We haven't invested in those nearly enough to be a globally competitive state economy. Those are 4 things we could do short of the legislature changing the tax rate, but I do believe the tax rate has to change too. If we do those 5 things, we'll be growing at 5% a year, and we won't have all these budget battles.
Okay. I want to ask you a bit about a different topic, which is the opioid epidemic in Pennsylvania. And it's certainly a very serious issue here in the greater Hazleton area. I mean, we have almost every day I'm seeing the news, reading the news about someone who's overdosed on heroin or other prescription medications. What do you plan to do to help tackle this epidemic?
Yeah. So I was at an opioid summit yesterday in Philadelphia. That's how I spent my whole day because I wanted to learn more about this. And just one alarming figure is it's getting worse by the day. Okay, it's getting worse. All the estimates from even January are now no longer relevant because it's increasing at that rate. So point number 1, I would declare a statewide emergency. We're losing close to 15 fellow citizens a day. That's 100 a week. I don't sense the urgency that's commensurate with the destruction that this crisis is creating. I think any good leader would first of all declare a state of emergency.
And what will that do specifically?
It'll bring the relevant folks together to the table to solve this problem or to work until the problem is solved. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have the answer, but what I do know is the following. It is partially a clinical issue, how we prescribe drugs, how we track the prescription and issuing of drugs. It is a big part social, cultural issue. Our fellow citizens are suffering from diseases of despair. They don't have hope. We were just talking about job creation. We're losing population. We're not creating jobs. A lot of people don't have hope. We have to address that. And it's a criminal issue. It's all 3 of those. And unfortunately, our governor has very narrowly tried to address this as a clinical issue only. Okay? So I think we'd broaden it, make it more comprehensive. I would start experimenting absolutely frenetically with potential answers. Rapid cycle, let's try it. If it doesn't work 2 weeks later, let's try something else. So this is what I've seen in business for a long time. People don't get it right the first time, but people do get it right over time, but they have to be very focused on learning and then changing and getting to the right answer. I don't see any of that happening. I would do all of that. I think this is the most significant health crisis that's faced the Commonwealth in a century, and we're acting like it's some corollary issue to being able to buy wine in the grocery store or something.
Right. Another issue we haven't touched upon, which we don't have a lot of time in this segment, but I do want to touch upon education.
Yeah.
Because during the last gubernatorial race, there was a bit of a false story coming from the other side that the Republicans were making, the governor was making these massive cuts to education. Not necessarily true. We were comparing 1 year of stimulus funds to a non-year, et cetera. But people want to know that their children are going to be well educated in Pennsylvania, and they want to know that they're not going to go broke. Certainly the people of the greater Hazleton area are very concerned about property taxes being where they are when they are on fixed incomes.
Yes.
It's a big issue.
It's a huge issue. So let's go back and talk first about funding to education. So our governor has increased funding from the state to education 14% in the last 2 to 3 years. Everyone says, well, that's great. Education's a priority. Well, over 70% of it's gone to teacher pensions. It's not getting to the classroom. Our standardized test scores are not improving. So anyone who says he's investing in education, he's investing in pensions. That's what he's investing in. It's not getting to our kids. My standard on education is very simple. Are our children prepared for meaningful work in the 21st century when they get out of high school? You could go around the Commonwealth, 25 to 30% of them aren't. Just look at the PSSA scores. A large percentage of them can't read.
Yes.
A larger percentage cannot perform Algebra 1. So we're spending all of this money, and the end product we're getting is not prepared for meaningful work in the 21st century. Again, I don't sense the urgency around that issue. That's a tragedy if you think about how many children are being let out into the environment at age 18 without a prayer of being successful. So that's huge. Now, if you look at the cost of education in the last decade, the main drivers of those costs have been pensions and healthcare benefits. And if you look at the pensions and healthcare benefits of our teachers, they far exceed what the average Pennsylvanian has access to. We need to address those issues. That's going to be the way to lower property taxes.
Okay, and actually I want to pick it up in the last segment talking a bit more about the topic of pensions. So with that, we are going to take a break. We will be right back on The Storm. Welcome back to The Storm. Pensions. We have about 3 minutes left, so I'm sure we'll solve it all in the next 3 minutes. But I do want to talk to you about the fact that the Republican-held dominated House and Senate recently did do something positive, in that they passed some pension reform in that future state employees will be moving to a 401k type of system. This is a good thing. It's some progress.
It's a step in the right direction.
It is. It absolutely is. But on the other hand, it's not going to solve the unfunded pension crisis that we have in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's a tough issue, not an easy one to tackle. How does one go about tackling it, in your opinion?
Yeah, so let me just state a couple of facts first. So it doesn't go into effect until 2019. And at least by independent financial analyses, the first time the state benefits from that change is about 15 years in the future. So no one from this bill, no one should expect any change, at least downward change, in property taxes because of this bill for 15 years. So we just want to be clear on that. But I think there's 3 or 4 things that we absolutely need to do to make this happen. One is, my belief is, we have in Harrisburg, we have 81,000 state employees, okay? As I go there and look around, and this is just my business mind, no digitization.
Dead weight.
No real automation of processes. I get a kick out of someone saying, oh, we had to lay off all these call center folks and we only hired back a third. I'm thinking, what company uses a call center anymore. You can go online and do some of this stuff. So I think there's a huge modernization task. And by the way, the state employees are good people. They're not bad people. They're just poorly led.
Right.
They're poorly led. And they need to be brought into the 21st century with the right technology and the right processes. My guess is we could have 20, 25% fewer, and if we modernize the government. So that's big. Two is there are some egregious abuses of the last 3 years of one's tenure in the government. And if you look closely at a lot of the pension numbers and pension obligations, they come from voluntary overtime in the last 3 years, and you know the formula. It's based on that last 3 years. And there are some abuses there, and other people have talked about that. We should shut that down right away.
Okay.
Third is we should absolutely move people, to all of the existing employees, to a hybrid, what they call kind of defined benefit, defined contribution right away. Why are we waiting, and why are we only doing it with new employees? This is going to take 15 years. To do it. So there are 3 or 4 things that we should do. We do have a $75 billion unfunded liability. That hasn't been addressed by this bill at all. And by the way, I think politically what's going to happen is the Democrats are going to say, we did our part. We're moving all our employees over time to defined contribution. Now we have to fund the $75 billion. I'm predicting we're going to see a big tax bill coming in the next 12 months.
Okay, with that interesting thought, we need to end. I thank you so much for coming on the show,
My
Paul
pleasure.
Mango. I appreciate this being your very first stop in Hazleton.
Absolutely.
Please come back anytime. And remember, folks, when you look around and don't like what you see, don't complain about it. You can do something about it. Learn about the candidates, and thank you for watching.